do is to see more about the origin of this figure we just personified and called Eros. Now, let's do that. Let's change it. Let's raise a couple of difficult questions for our culture. We don't like asking a set of questions, but once you see the value of these questions, obviously you can get into it. And what you're getting into is metaphysics. So look here. What is beauty, love, wisdom, reality? Right? What is the origin of love, beauty, reality, wisdom? What power does it have? It being, of course, any one of those four or other things. Now, so far we've talked about the origin of Aphrodite, you see. We talked about the origin of Aphrodite. Only in respect to her birth in that one moment. So we're now talking about the personification of love and calling him Eros. So if we inquire who was his father and who was his mother, then what that would mean, would it not, is that the mother must represent a set of ideas which must have a certain unity, and that unity must be capable of being personified by his mother. And again, his father. There has to be some sense in which we can speak about both, so long as that represents also a set of ideas which can be brought together into a unity, personified. Look here. Personified. That's the father. This then is the mother. Now, look here, to have a myth, you need several things or you don't have a myth at all. Most important thing is that it has to serve the highest function, it has to serve a high purpose, it has to serve the need to illuminate some very profound idea. That's its goal. That's how mythology exists. All right. It also must have characters. At least one of must be divine, or, if not divine, the son of a divine, son or daughter of a divine. The characters themselves must have a set of characteristics so they can be distinguished and talked about. There must be a setting for the story and a drama. If you have these elements, you have the mythology. So, our purpose is very clear. We want to understand this most interesting figure, which is Aphrodite. That's our goal. That would be our goal. And Aphrodite represents beauty. Therefore, we'd like to understand beauty. Therefore, we're really asking this question. What's the origin of beauty? We can ask, what's the origin of love? What's the origin of wisdom? What's the origin of reality? Because the same way of exploring any one of those questions is equally true for all of them. That's what mythology is doing. So look here. I'll give you the story of this myth in Plato's Symposium. We will start by saying, of course, the gods held a feast, a banquet, to celebrate the birth of Aphrodite. It was a great occasion, and plenty came. He was a god, and he stepped out to the park, the garden, Zeus's garden, and was drinking nectar, and he enjoyed it immensely. And by the way, he was observed by Aphrodite, by Poverty. She was in a doorway, hoping to get close, and sure enough, that nectar got to him, bang, he passed out. He passed out. Poverty saw her chance. Sex in heaven. Blushing it is, nonetheless. And in heavens, of course, Eros was born. Right? And therefore, once Eros or love was born, he is in hot pursuit of Aphrodite, where he must be the attendant and follower. Now, we said before that each of the characters must be identified, and what each one of them, how each one of them is described, we need a list of terms from the story itself of how each one of them are described. When you have then the characters, the way in which they're described, the setting that they have, then you can then get the drama, such as we've represented, and so what do you do with it? Go a couple of more steps. Here in this beautiful picture, you see the same thing, what we just did. Now, in this one, you should be able to read the myth and get the particular way in which each one of these figures is described and write them all down. Right? If you did that, then you could arrange it. You could arrange it in a very interesting way. And this is called the matrix of ideas. If you were to do this, you can do it. All it takes is reading carefully. You list the characteristics of the mythical figures, poverty, plenty, love, Aphrodite. You list them here. Then you go back into the dialogue and you look to see how each of the people are being described in the dialogue. How they describe themselves and how other people describe them. Then, would you not agree? You should then be able to see whether how many of those items check off for each of the people in the dialogue. This will get you a very interesting problem. And I'd like to talk a bit about that problem and the value of the drama in understanding mythology. All right. There are approximately 50 terms There are approximately 20 people mentioned. You can then check off your table, we'll call it a matrix of ideas, and you will find that, let us give a couple of examples. We might be able to look and say, this fellow by the name of Aristomenos is very much like poverty. So as poverty is to plenty, is to love, so too it looks like, since Aristodemus checks all of those, or most of those, we could say, so too Aristodemus is to whoever, let's see, who in that list looks, Agathon looks very much like plenty. And suppose we went further and said, you know what, it looks very much like Apollodorus.